Hey, welcome back to the Greater You. Good to see you guys today. So let's have a chat today about the four agreements. I'm sure many of you have heard of this or read the book. Miguel Ruiz wrote this book a number of years ago. A little backstory on this. A friend of mine, her name was Poe, awesome gal. We were working in youth treatment. This is years ago. I was in a different town and everything many years back. And, Poe's awesome. She was working as a staff. We were in a youth treatment facility working with troubled teens, trying to help them put their lives back together. It was some pretty intense work. Had some amazing experiences. One day she was sitting there and she was reading this book. I'm like, hey, what's this book? She's like, hey, this is called The Four Agreements. You have to read this. And she kind of told me a little bit about it. And I was like, wow, that sounds amazing. This is probably, I'm going to say, oh five, oh six, somewhere around there, when this went down. Anyway, she's like, hey, well, we're just chilling here. We were in between events at our center. And so I had some time. She's like, hey, give this thing a read. This book was so captivating. I sat there and read it cover to cover uh, right there that afternoon while hanging out with her. And it was a life changer. This book is awesome. It's up there in my kind of top 10 favorites. I probably have a lot of top 10 favorites. My top 10 favorites list is probably 100 books. I don't know. But either way, there's a lot of great stuff out there. And The Four Agreements by Ruiz is definitely one of those top 10s. Okay. So let's talk about his four agreements and what he's trying to get us to do. When I, as a coach, teach people about the four agreements, I share these with them to help them build their boundaries back, maybe for the first time. Here's what I mean by this. So if you look at that first one there, be impeccable with your word. Now, understandably, none of us are going to be perfect at all four of these agreements at any point, right? But the goal is to strive. These are like stretch goals to work to try and obtain and live these to the best of our ability, recognizing we're going to have really off days and make mistakes and violate some of these. And then we learn with like growth mindset that we talked about recently, and we adjust, adapt, and do better, right? So we're not talking about perfection in these when we talk about these at the Greater You and talk about the four agreements. We're talking about striving to live these more. So being impeccable with your word, speak with integrity, say only what you mean, avoid using the words to speak against yourself or gossip about others. That's huge. Use the power of your word in the direction of truth and love. I love all of those statements by Ruiz. The idea here with being impeccable with your word is to have that integrity in the language that you use. Be kind to people behind their back and also have the integrity to be kind to them in front of them. If you're having trouble with someone, keep that to yourself and work through it on your own rather than pulling them into the mud or pulling your friends into the mud around that. That's part of this being impeccable with your word. Notice how that starts to build boundaries right away. You're no longer giving in to that negative talk. Very, very life-changing. Number two, this can be one of the hardest of the four agreements. None of these are easy. They're all stretch goals. Don't take anything personally, right? Nothing others do is because of you. What others say and do is a projection of their own reality. When you are immune to the opinions and actions of others, you won't be the victim of needless suffering, right? So that's huge. Oh, my lands. Don't take anything personally. I love that idea. That creates an internal boundary where we're not letting stuff in that doesn't need to come in. For those that speak, English, especially those of us in the United States of America, there's a cultural problem. Now we're going to draw from neurolinguistic programming again, the study of language and how it impacts behavior. What we found in NLP is that language shapes the way that people think about everything. It's so powerful. One of the mistakes that we've done in the United States of America in our language development is we've taught our kids inadvertently some mistakes in their thinking. And they sound like this. You made me mad. You made me happy. That made me happy or sad. We have this language that we use where we take our feelings and we blame them on events and people. And now think about the implications of that. That sets us up to take everything personally. Why is it that people get so intense online and get so offended and say such, raunchy things to each other online in different social medias and all these kinds of things and in the news or wherever? Well, it's because they're taking things personally. They've trained themselves inadvertently to think that what the other person says or does is going to have a direct effect on how you feel and think. That's a lack of boundaries. There's no boundary there. So we want to build that boundary back by not taking things personally and recognizing, by and large, we choose how we feel. To quote the great Stephen Covey, he would say, if there's an action and then there's a reaction, the reactive person, there's no space between the action and the reaction occurring. They just go boom, boom, right? Someone says something rude to you online and you immediately respond with an angry face and tell the person off, right? And someone cuts you off on the highway and you immediately give them the bird, right? That's such an American thing to do, right? Yeah, there's a lot of kind drivers out there too, sometimes. But think about that. There's an action and you're immediately reacting. That's because you're thinking that they made you angry. They did something to you. Well, what if they were just driving stupidly? What if they missed checking their blind spot? What if they spilled their coffee on in their lap and they're like, oh, dang, and they swerve? I don't know what's going on with them. What if they're in a rush to go to the hospital because they've got a family member that's hurt? What if they're late for work? All of us have done stupid driving things because we're late for work. So what makes them so bad compared to me, right? So what Stephen Covey recommends is that you create a space between the action or stimulus and our response. And in that space, you use choice. Okay. That's part of how you can work on this not taking things personally gig. Okay. Number 3, don't make assumptions. Woo, that's a tough one. We're telling you, these 4 agreements they're stiff, guys. They call us out big time. I feel called out. I'm going to work on this. Find the courage to ask questions and to express what you really want. Communicate with others as clearly as you can to avoid misunderstanding, sadness, and drama. With just this one agreement, you can completely transform your life. I totally agree with that about every one of these, right? What you've all seen people like conjugate the word assumption. You make an ass out of you and me. We've all seen that. It's funny. It's cheeky. It's true, right? When we make assumptions, we become a horse's rear, right? Because we don't actually have the ability to read minds. Wow, newsflash. So when we step back from making assumptions and ask like, wait, what's really going on here? What data am I missing? We're once again creating space between the thing that's happening and our response. And we're filling it with choice. We're filling it with questions. We're filling it with trying to communicate more clearly. How many arguments would I have saved myself from in my lifetime if I hadn't assumed intent, if I hadn't assumed that I had all the information, if I hadn't assumed that, this person meant this or that, instead of just clarifying, say, hey, when you said that, what did you mean by that? Oh my gosh, that could change everything, right? So let's work on not making assumptions. The 4th agreement by Mr. Don, I think it's Don Miguel Ruiz. Anyway, Miguel Ruiz. So by good old Ruiz is always do your best. Okay. Always do your best. Your best is going to change from moment to moment. It will be different when you are healthy as opposed to when you're sick. Totally, right? Under any circumstances, simply do your best. That doesn't mean be perfect. It just means do your best. You'll avoid self-judgment, self-abuse, and regret. Doing your best isn't meaning perfection. It's meaning striving and making an effort and trying to be resilient and just putting our best foot forward. This one's a little harder to define than the other 3 that are a little more detailed because it's really subjective to the person. If you're doing your best or not. And also be careful not to be too hard on yourself, telling yourself that you're never doing your best, because that's going to set you up to feel bad anyway. But think about that. What does it mean to do my best in this situation? And I think the way to apply this one in a practical standpoint is to take it day by day, situation by situation, leading in with the question that you ask yourself, like, hey, what's the best thing I could do in this situation where my boss just sent this random email that said he needs a report that usually takes me a month to produce and he needs it at the end of the week? What's doing my best going to look like? Should I get reactive? Should I push back immediately with the boss? Or should I do some of these other things? And is doing my best to say, hey, can we have a quick meeting? Try and schedule something with your boss, get more clarity, do some more communication. Is doing your best to get the report together as quickly as you can, recognizing it won't be as thorough as if you did it in the full month. Is that your best? Only you will know. Take it moment by moment, day by day, situation by situation. So Miguel Ruiz, The Four Agreements. Awesome, awesome, awesome stuff. Love this book. Highly recommend this book. And even more, I recommend working to live these things that he's given us. We've also referenced Stephen Covey, one of my favorite mentors of all time. So great. Okay, let's put him in the top 10 too. There's so many in the top 10, right? But Stephen Covey, that idea of between an action, a behavior or a stimulus, we want to create choice so that we can respond rather than being reactive, right? And that's definitely a way to start practicing these four agreements in a practical way. So I'd love to hear your comments and your thoughts about these four agreements. What strategies have you found to be successful to bring these into your life? A lot of people have read this book. If you haven't read the book, read it and let us know your review. If you like this video, like it. We've got more to come. It was really good to spend some time with you today. Take care, and we'll talk soon.